It's time for another Crystal Red Shrimp Tank update. Now this one's not going to be all that exciting, not much has really gone on. But addressing the death of a Crystal Red, the last updates, I want to show you what I believe to be the actual problem. And it's not the pH of the water or anything like that. I still have 9 of the 11 shrimp that I originally started out with over a month ago. So, what was the issue? Well, I did some testing and these are the nitrates. Now, it's a bit orange. Focus here. But we could do better than that. And I did a water change. Now we're down to yellow. And if we look on our nitrate testing kit, it was a deeper orange, probably closer to 30 parts per million, and now we're much closer to the 5 parts per million range. What I did, and this took a long time because, again, these shrimps are quite sensitive, or at least I'm assuming so. I drip acclimate my shrimp, and I also drip water change the shrimp tanks. Now, given the amount of nitrates, I really wanted to reduce those nitrates as far as I could do it reasonably. So I reduced it to half of the water in this 10-gallon tank, leaving 5 gallons. Over the course of 5 days, I would drip very slowly the water back into the tank with some clean water that I have my Fluval filter. Yeah, I know there's a toilet there. This room was actually meant to be a restroom in this house before I moved in, and I just kept the toilet for water changes. Little backstory. But I pre-filtered the water with my Fluval canister filter. It's got a ton of biomedia, it's fully cycled, etc. And it's aerated as well. I got an air line coming down, so it's very clean water. And it comes directly from my well. It bypasses my RO system and comes right in here where it gets filtered out in case of things like ammonia, etc. like that, in case there's anything like that in the water. And I drip it back in. Now, I did tune the drip to be approximately 1 gallon per 24 hours. So it genuinely took 5 days to do a water change on this tank, but the results are pleasing. I have seen a ton of molting in this tank, but no deaths as a result of the molting. Now, I finished this dripping of the water change about 2 days ago. Everyone seems to be doing fine. But there is a new game plan that I'm going to enact for these guys for the future, because here's the thing. A few shrimp in this tank is hardly a bioload. It's nothing. The bioload comes from the snails. Now, I keep the snails in here because they're peaceful and I am breeding the snails, but the snails do require a bit more food, and they are very slow-moving snails. Rabbit snails are, unlike their name would suggest, just very, very slow creatures. So sometimes that food doesn't get eaten right away, and it, eventually converts to ammonia, which, through the nitrogen cycle, creates nitrate. In this case, I'm going to move these snails to one of the other tanks in this row, but I need to get some lights for them, because I do still want them to have a circadian rhythm to adhere to. And I think separating them will allow me to feed them and make them a little more happy. I don't really want to crank up the heat in order to make them breed faster. I think, despite the fact that they breed very slowly, I like them nevertheless. And in fact, there's been new baby rabbit snails. Little chunky boys. Let's see. There's a chunky boy. There's a chunky boy. Oop. There's a chunky boy. Point is, there's a lot of little chonkers in this tank now. I started out with about 5 or 6 rabbit snails, and I've got definitely more than double that now. So, there's some plans. So this will also leave the algae and biofilm for the shrimp to just naturally graze on. I really shouldn't have to feed this tank any supplements if it's just shrimp. They can just pick at the biofilm and algae all day long, which is what they do anyway, without really having to feed anything extra. So the reason I move these rabbit snails in this tank here in the first place was because they were originally in this tank. And there were bladder snails in this tank, and there still are, unfortunately. I was hoping Jafafari, the goldfish here, would eat the bladder snails, because I've heard that goldfish do that. But perhaps he needs to be a little bigger before he'll actually consume them. Or maybe he's just a gentle soul. He's a really good fish. Like, I know he's just a standard feeder goldfish, but he's been with me for a few months now, and he's a good boy. Or girl. I have no idea. I don't really know much about goldfish other than the fact that they're really not tank fish, man. They're a pond fish. I'm going to get a 125-gallon fish tank, and I'm probably going to put Jafafari in there so he can, swim around and have fun, have some little buddies. But, yeah, the problem with feeding rabbit snails when there's bladder snails in a tank is the bladder snails are faster. And quite frankly, they get to the food faster than the rabbit snails, which is why I moved them into this tank. So, yeah, that's the backstory. That's the reasons for everything, and I think everything's playing out nicely. I still have buried females, which they are, at least one of them is due to have hatched eggs within a week, I believe. And the two that passed away were not the buried females, thank goodness. We can see... I think this is a mama shrimp. Kind of hard to tell from this angle, but I think those are eggs under there. Still, things are going relatively well. Better than I would have expected a month ago.